Notorious Fig. I'm going to do a follow-up video to the video I put out about a week ago on rooting single node fig cuttings, and I've had a lot of questions about how I put together the containers with those single node cuttings. So essentially this is going to be kind of a prequel to that video. There are a couple of questions that people had, and just wanted to clear that up. So what I have today is some St. Martin cuttings, and these came from Garden Crochet, and Garden Crochet is a seller out of California, and I think she is the person who introduced Nuestra Senora del Carmen, and that's a pretty fantastic fig. So I have 3 cuttings of St. Martin fig, and these have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, between 4 and 6 nodes on them. So we're not going to do the single node cuttings for these, but it's the same thing. If I wanted to, this one here, this is a terminal bud. It's a little thin, and these two a little thicker, and I really don't need to do multiple single node cuttings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set these in, and you can do the same thing, and you have more energy. If anything goes bad, you get any rot, you can cut, keep trying with the smaller cutting. So what I'm going to do is show you how I'm going to place these cuttings in here. As you can see, the cuttings fit this way. And what I'm going to do is put some sand, put some perlite already, you can see. And this is just about 1/2 to 3/4 inches of perlite. I'm going to lay the cuttings out. I'm going to put little plant markers in there so I know what the cutting is, what variety, and that way I can come in later and add more varieties to this. I can probably put a dozen cuttings in here of other varieties over time, and just keep this under the mat and pull out the cuttings that are rooted and ready to go. Today is January 4th, and kind of a partly cloudy day, so this is a good time to get outside, get some fresh air, and do this. So what I'm going to do is take these cuttings, cut off the end with a pair of clean pruners. Whenever you're rooting cuttings, you want to clean with pruners with an alcohol wipe. Whenever you switch varieties, when you're done using your pruners, clean them off. Every time you pick up your pruners, clean them off. There's just a chance that you can spread fig mosaic virus that way. It doesn't take very long to do it. So I'm going to cut these, I'm going to dip them in the rooting hormone, and then place them on the sand. But right now I'm going to go ahead and fill this up with sand, and the sand is pre-moistened. It's been outside, it's gotten rained on and so forth. I've used the same sand before. I don't need to wash it or rinse it. If you want to, that's an extra step. I'm just not going to do that here. So I have some natural play sand. This is just from big box store, and I imagine if you get some more coarse sand, that would help even more. But this is pretty fine sand, and it works. So it does retain quite a bit of moisture. That's something to think about. If you like to get some sand, if it's available that's a little more coarse, that'd be great too, or even a mixture. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix it in here with the perlite, and I'm going to let the sand actually get down in the perlite. So it's not going to be a clean layer of perlite and then followed by a clean layer of sand. And that's only just in case that there's not a perched water table. So if I have the perlite here and then sand only above, there's a chance in this that the water will retain in the sand and not go down into the perlite. That's the same thing you gotta be concerned about if you're doing pots and you're putting kind of rocks or something at the bottom of a big pot and you're potting up a fig tree. If you have a different substrate, a different media, and then you have your potting soil above that, your water table is going to stay right at the bottom of your potting soil and then not completely go down into those rocks. So that can create an artificially high perched water table. It's something to think about. For all of my potted fig trees, I have the potting soil mix all the way down to the bottom. That's just the best way to do it. With a container this big, you can really put in as much perlite or sand as you want, but you really don't need that much. As you can see how thick the cutting is right there, and you could mound the sand over the cutting as well if you need to. I'm just working my fingers down in there so the sand is actually making contact with the bottom. Perlite's going to help add a lot of aeration to this to make sure that as there's moisture and water, it's going to go all the way to the bottom and it won't sit right on the cutting as much. So this is pretty simple. There's not a lot of science that you have to be worried about. Just put some perlite, put some sand in it, and you'll be fine. So now move on to the cuttings. And what I did with these last night is once I received them, I took them out of the package, and Garden Crochet does a really fantastic job of packaging these, and these look very clean when I received them. I unwrapped the cuttings and I put some dish soap and a toothbrush and cleaned and scrubbed each cutting all the way down, all around the cuttings, rinsed them off, and then I used a baking dish and laid the cuttings in there, put some water, and then just squirted in hydrogen peroxide, and I didn't measure, but you can see you put enough in there. Some people say about a third, maybe quarter, a third hydrogen peroxide. You don't need that much. Just cover with water to where it's up to the cutting. Put the hydrogen peroxide on there, and you'll see the bubbles come up and do their work. Let it sit there for a couple hours. Took them out of that baking dish, put them on some towels to dry, and then patted them dry and let them sit out overnight or for about 3 hours. Let them sit out for 3 hours. And made sure they were patted dry, turning them frequently, and then I put them in the fridge. So today they're ready to go. So the cuttings, when you put a long cutting, it's going to root down here. It's going to shoot up down here and maybe up this a little ways, but it's going to stay away from the top of the cutting. So at this point, I'm going to line these up. Line up the cuttings, cut off the bottoms. Now here there's a node right at the bottom. Doesn't really matter, I'm just going to get close. There's so many nodes on this already. Now here there's just a little bit of brown. I cut it away. I have the brown bark, bright green, and then the yellow, and then white. Put it over here. There's just a little brown, so what I'm going to do is keep cutting this until I see no brown. And there you go. Go on to the next cutting. Nice and clean. Now this cutting I have more space down here. If I do a little cut, then the roots are going to be below this node. If I go real close to the node with my cut, then the roots are going to jump up here when it roots in the container. Nice and clean. And I'm just going to get a little bit of rooting hormone powder. Just tap it in there like that. Tap it in. that's it. So now what I'm going to do is nestle down the cuttings so they're below or just kind of flat with the sand. So this is what the cuttings look like. I just push them down in there, and then I can leave these nodes up here exposed, and then cover up down at the bottom. You can spray the rest of it as well. That should be good. And I'll be spraying it every few days as well. And sometimes I'll spray it with a diluted fertilizer. And you want to be sure to label the cuttings. And what I'm going to do is put it in between right there. St. Martin. I know these three are St. Martin. So the video with the single node cuttings, I up-potted those. You saw how I did that. I'm going to show you an update on what those look like. Take off this lid. A lot of water runs down. So there you go. This is Saint Germain. And most of these are Craven's Craving. And you can see, you can get a little bit of mold on that one. And what I'm going to do is spray diluted hydrogen peroxide. And you can see some algae growing as well. And there's a Craven's Craving. Looks pretty good. You can see how big it is compared to my hand. Craven's Craving. This is the Cessic. That one was the biggest and fastest growing. And it looks like it could use some hydrogen peroxide as well. So it's a pretty humid environment. So you can get that happening. We'll see how that goes. And that could probably be acclimated to coming out of here as these two as well. But they're kind of mixed in, so what I need to do is get another transitional container to acclimate those separately. We can see this Saint Germain is really rooting and shooting out these roots up in the air. There's nothing wrong with that. The roots are going all over the place inside. These will just dry off and air dry as it gets acclimated to less humidity. So that will be done little by little. So it's a very humid environment. To acclimate them over time, what I'm going to do is just turn that a little bit. And I'll do it just like that for a few days, and then slowly turn it completely open, and that one will be open over the course of probably a week. And here are some other cuttings that are also, you see some roots there, and they're also budding out. Craven's Craving. This is Campanieri. Not super strong growth. I can spray that with some hydrogen peroxide. And these are Bass's Favorite Fig. I think that one is not doing as great, but they all rooted, so we'll see. I have some green there. We'll see how those progress. And I'm going to put a lid on this container and then put it over a heat mat. And there's some heat mats you can get on Amazon that have a thermostat little probe. And what I'll do is I'll just put that probe underneath here between the heat mat and the probe and then the bottom here. So basically the very bottom, I'm going to have it set to about 78 degrees, and that should be fine. If you crank it up to 80, 82, it may make these root faster, but there's really no need. 78 should do everything you need, and you're going to keep this lid on top of this and maintain the humid environment. Keep the lid on at all times, and you can remove the lid and then spray it down if the humidity seems to be dying down inside. But this is going to hold really a ton of water, so you really shouldn't have too much problem heating it up, maintain that humidity, and getting your cuttings to root. Once you see a lot of root development, like we showed in the prior video, and you start seeing some green buds, you can get some light on this container. All right, that's it. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. Go ahead and subscribe, like the video, and I'll do some of these things. They're pretty simple things to do. Once you see it, you can just follow along and experiment for yourself.